All right, what's going on? I'm here with Nate Miyake, the author of the new Intermittent Feasting book. I'm super excited to have him on with me now. He's definitely my favorite nutrition expert, and you know what? Let's just get him on talking right away. So Nate, how did you get started? And how'd you get started? How'd you come and formulate your intermittent feasting approach?
Yeah, it's been a long obsessive journey for sure. And I'm sure like most people who are watching this, just kind of self-education and studying a lot of different approaches to nutrition. And it's been a 10, 15 year journey. So I'm glad I finally get to say I found something that I think works well, and I can share it now. So yeah, I kind of studied various approaches to nutrition, and like most people started in bodybuilding nutrition, probably reading the magazines, reading the diets of athletes and different coaches in that field, and it works. Bodybuilding nutrition is a great approach for physique enhancement, but what I found is there were some health issues, some digestive issues, some practicality issues in terms of, as my career progressed, eating 6 small meals and trying to starve at night can work in season for an athlete, but it doesn't really work when you have a real job and other things going on. So for me, it was taking lessons from that, then combining it with lessons from paleo nutrition, then some of the more advances in research and intermittent fasting protocols, and finally combining that with sports nutrition research to get to where I got, or to where my philosophy is now, which is kind of is a Bruce Lee approach. It's kind of absorbing what is useful from each of those philosophies, kind of rejecting what I thought were some of the problems with each of those approaches, and then kind of merging it into one sort of hybrid philosophy, if you want to call it. So that's how I kind of came to that. And if you want, we could talk about different things about each of those nutrition approaches, or however you see fit.
Yeah, well, you know what? Let's jump into the fasting component, because I find that very, very interesting and very applicable to myself and the clients that I work with. But you also mentioned Bruce Lee, and I could talk about Bruce Lee all day. There was actually a documentary yesterday on Bruce Lee. Wow, he's like a true pragmatist.
Yeah, and he doesn't get enough credit. Greatest martial artist, obviously, but I think he was one of the greatest coaches and greatest philosophers as well. So I think I definitely borrowed my coaching approach and my philosophical approach from him too. But I just think he was a great coach, and a lot of it was taking, like, not getting caught up in following a system or in trying to please everyone around you, but really just basically getting to the heart of the matter, finding what works, cutting out what doesn't, regardless of what that source is, and just getting down to the nuts and bolts of really what works. And I think that's why his system was so effective.
Yeah, for sure. And that type of mentality can be applied to so many different things, especially fitness and nutrition. And so,
absolutely.
So the Bruce Lee. So it's good to bring up Bruce Lee at this point in time, but
yes.
but let's talk about the intermittent fasting, because that's a big component of your program.
Yeah.
And how is that incorporated into the intermittent feast?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think in terms of so to me, attaining body composition goals, which is most people's primary motivating factor, is all about optimum food choices and then targeted numbers. So if you want to gain weight, you got to eat a certain amount of calories and have certain macros to support your training. If you want to lose fat, same thing. You got to be in a deficit, and you got to eat the right foods to maintain muscle while your diet's taking care of fat loss. So really, body composition change comes down to good food choices and targeted numbers. Now, from that point, meal frequency and food distribution, to me anyways, is all about how can we stick to those numbers best? What is the most practical, sustainable way to structure our diets to make sure we do stick to those good food choices and targeted numbers? And to me, that's where I say, the whole fitness nutrition or bodybuilding nutrition approach works, but it's not the most practical, most sustainable plan for a very large percentage of the population. And so if meal frequency and food distribution doesn't matter as much as food choices and targeted numbers, then we can structure our diets in any way we see fit to make it the most practical, to make it the most sustainable, to make sure we adhere to it. So what people were finding is like, hey, intermittent fasting is this great approach because it just makes the plan so much easier to follow and to stick to. You skip a meal. We evolved as hunter-gatherers, I always like to say.
Mm-hmm.
It's I know it's a little cheesy, but it's a good sort of educational tool. It's like, yeah, hey, maybe this idea that we need to eat every 2.5 hours and equal calorie meals is not really necessary. We evolved in a completely different way where we were basically skipping meals or eating lighter during the day and then coming home and have a big feast at night. So instinctually and socially, that's what people want to do. So with that being said, you got to stick to the right food choices. You got to have targeted numbers. But then, to me, meal frequency and food distribution is more flexible. And people are finding that one of the easiest plans to stick to is the intermittent fasting approaches, or what I call intermittent feast, which is mine is a little different, but it's all about the practicality and sustainability of a plan. And most people who switch to that, they never go back. They're like, I could never go back to traditional fitness spreads. The intermittent fasting is just too practical and too easy for me to stick to.
That's terrific. I mean, those were amazing points. I mean, that's one of the big things. Because intermittent fasting is becoming really popular in the media. If you're ever online, it's a big talk right now. But a lot of people are making it out to be a lot more than it is. Like, eat your calories within like a 6-hour or 8-hour window, and it doesn't matter what you eat. Like, you'll lose fat, you'll build muscle, and it's just absolute bullshit. Like, you have to.
I just saw that, and I know what you're talking about, and it's total crap. It's basically taking a good principle and then spinning it on its head and using it to sell. Basically, what people want to hear is that they can eat whatever they want and still lose weight. It's total fallacy, and it's total just being used to sell bullshit. You still have to eat the right foods and have the targeted macros.
Right.
I mean, you can't change science, but So,
and for those that don't,
man, don't use it as a miracle cure. Despite some of the marketing things, you're going to start seeing it as a miracle cure.
And so, for those that don't know about the macros, those like your protein, fats, and carbs, and they will total like your calorie number. And so at the end of the day, you still have to hit your calories and macros, and then so what Nate is saying is that the intermittent feast or intermittent fast, by having 2 meals instead of the conventional, or 2 or 3 meals instead of the conventional 5, 6 plus, it's just so much more enjoyable to stay within your calories and your macros.
Right. It allows you to satisfy some natural instincts, which is one is to eat big. Like we're meant to hunt and feast, and so you never really get to do that if you're eating 5 small meals a day. And so you feel you're on this diet plan, and you feel like you're depriving yourself, you're starving yourself, and that's why competitors can stick to that for a 10-week window. But I always tell people, I was like, look, I want to look good year round, so don't look at a diet plan as what you can do for 10 weeks. What can you do that you can sustain as a lifestyle plan? Now, yes, of course, calories are going to go up or down based on different phases of that plan, but your overall, essentially, approach to nutrition shouldn't be a quick fix thing. It should be something that's like a baseline plan that you can sustain indefinitely, and then we adjust things, through different phases. Hey, I want to bulk up, I want to cut down, whatever, but your overall plan should be a sustainable plan regardless of the phase. So that's what I always tell people, too, is like, some of these plans look great on paper in the magazines, but they're like quick fix, 8-week plans. If you can't sustain it, it's meaningless to me.
For sure. Let's get into like the specifics of your approach. How you usually, we don't have to go into macros, but how you usually set up like the food choices, the meals, and your preferences there.
Yeah, sure, and that's a good way to segue into sort of what we talked about of polling from different nutritional camps. And one of the ones I've polled from is paleo nutrition. If people haven't heard of that, it's basically caveman nutrition theory, evolution nutrition theory, and the short summary is basically most of our health problems and body composition problems come from overeating refined foods and modern processed foods. So the caveman movement or the paleo movement is basically just saying eat from your evolutionary past. Eat foods that were around in caveman times. If man made it, don't eat it. That type of thing. So that is basically it's 80% of my dietary template, which is basically what are caveman foods. It's animal proteins. It's plant foods. So vegetables, whole fruits, nuts and seeds, that type of thing. And then and what I found with that is a great approach for 70% of the population that is sedentary, that doesn't work out, that only performs low intensity activity. If you're one of those people, you should probably just be following a paleo template 100%. Where I ran into problems with that is it doesn't account for modern athletic activity, anaerobic training, where you're doing these strength training sessions or high intensity interval sessions where you're burning through muscle glycogen reserves. You're damaging muscle tissue in hopes that it repairs and grows, and you can gain a bunch of muscle mass and things like that. The paleo template, to me, falls short in that realm for athletes. Because exercise creates this unique metabolic hormonal demand on the body, recovery demands, and so you need to account for that. It's a modern activity, so that's where we need to move away from pure paleo templates that again are there now to support anaerobic training. So a second template I use is what I call the Japanese village diet, or traditional Japanese village diet. So it's basically the same thing. It just adds back in some starch foods, again, to support anaerobic training. And what is that? Again, it's animal proteins, vegetables, whole fruit, and then adding back in a select few starches, which are basically root vegetables, so sweet potatoes, yams, things like that, and then white rice as a sort of low anti-nutrient starch food that can be used to support anaerobic training.
Okay, cool. Very cool. So by low anti-nutrients, you like the free of gluten and phytates and things that cause.
And that's one of the benefits of, if you don't know anything about nutrition, that's one of the benefits of like paleo or caveman templates is they solve a lot of modern nutritional problems automatically without people having to get deep into the sort of biochemistry or physiology of it. But yes, so anti-nutrients is one of the class of nutrients that, following a paleo diet, basically rids from the modern American diet, which is like heavy emphasis on gluten, starches, phytates in certain grains, things that inhibit protein absorption, mineral absorption, that can be very problematic on digestion. And that's where I left the bodybuilding template there as well, is because even though I was getting great results, I had digestive problems and all those things. So, and a lot of it was the starch foods I was eating that were causing that. So by shifting to paleo and then adding back in better starches, that's when I sort of hit a home run for myself and some of my clients.
Okay, yeah, cool. I mean, that's a problem that I ran into myself in the past. Dieting, cutting down my carbs really low. Just kind of like low energy, some muscle loss, the low carb induced insomnia, and very irritable, almost psychopathic at times.
Yeah, and no six pack is worth that, man. Seriously.
No, low sex drive, yeah.
Yeah, I've talked to several coaches who have all gone through the same thing, and it seems like you just have to go do that yourself to know what you're talking about. But we're trying to save you from that, so you don't have to experience with that. Yeah, but so when I combine a pure lower carb version of a paleo diet, I suffered, and combined it with anaerobic training. That's the key. I think it could work great for sedentary populations, people who only do low intensity activity. But I was combining it with high volume bodybuilding style anaerobic training, and yeah, I lost muscle, irritable. I was getting sick all the time, so low immunity. And the worst was, of course, I'm a pervert, but I had no sex drive, and sure enough, went and got my testosterone levels checked, and they were like a 70-year-old's levels. So people don't understand that. They think dietary fat is the only nutrient that supports optimum natural testosterone levels, but that's not the case. Yeah. When combined with anaerobic training, there's actually a lot of research that carbohydrates and the carbohydrate to protein ratio can actually affect testosterone levels. So as soon as I added back in that starch to support anaerobic training, testosterone levels went back up, and the old pervert was back, and it was all good. So there you go.
And that's one thing people don't realize about carbs is they're very anabolic, and having full glycogen stores is important in like the muscle building process.
Absolutely, absolutely. Carbs get a bad name, but really, it's really the wrong. It's really when you have a sedentary person follow an athlete's diet, they get a bad name. So it's
Right.
wrong amounts, wrong types. So 50% of the carbs in the American diet are sugar or fructose. So there you go, right there. Those are two of the most problematic nutrients in the modern American diet. So when you look at carb diets, the way most Americans do, or what is used as most controls and studies, of course, carbs are going to get a bad name because it's just sugar and fructose and gluten-based carb. But you look at looking at that in terms of better food choices. Again, that's why I use the Japanese village diet as a template. Well, you look at some of those populations like the Okinawans, Kintavans, Japanese diet pre-1991 before food refining went in there, and there's tons of studies there where very low obesity, very low diabetes rates, great health, no problems with body composition. So carbs, wrong amounts for the wrong demographics, and then wrong types are why they get a bad name. But for athletes, if they're using the right ones, can be some of your best friends in terms of supporting training.
For sure. And how do you structure the carbs into the diet? Because I know you usually use like a 2-meal, like a lunch and dinner
Sure.
Template, and then you like to keep most of the carbs at night, the last meal. So can you tell us about
Right.
how that works?
Yeah, so that's really where I got into. That's why I call it intermittent feast, because the whole I guess structural foundation of the dietary approach is that you eat the majority of your calories and carbohydrates at night, and that is really based again on evolutionary theory. But there's some physiology and research behind that as well. But yeah, I structure my diet plans. There's still periods of the day where you want to keep insulin and insulin levels under control, blood sugar under control, so your body's optimally burning fat. And it goes back to, again, we're meant to hunt and feast. We're meant to be out there in energy production mode, getting stuff done, training without a lot of food, and then coming home and have that big feast at night. So what that does, when you go through a period of the day where maybe you skipped breakfast and you've kept carbs low for a certain period of time, you've trained, now all of a sudden you're entering dinner with a big calorie deficit, right? Relatively depleted energy reserves. Insulin sensitivity to the muscle cells is higher. Nutrient partitioning, you get better, diversion of nutrients to the muscle cell away from the fat cell. And so when you have that big meal at night, those big feasts with all basically the majority of your starchy carbohydrates, you're just getting better fat burning during the day, better muscle growth at night. It's just a better overall approach. And that is physiology, but from a practicality standpoint, most people can, I say it takes care of psychological principles too, because most people can basically sacrifice during the day if they know they get to go home and have a big feast at night. So again, it's easier to stick to because they're like, look, I can eat lighter during the day, I can keep my carbs lower, just basically eat fruit and vegetable type carbs, and then have all my starches at dinner. Yeah, I can do that. I can eat lighter during the day and then integrate those at night. So on many levels, from physiology down to psychology down to practicality, I think it's just a better approach.
Hands down, yeah. Like, I hate dieting, but this I can do 100%. Yeah, yeah. Just having those big meals and being able to load up on the starches and sacrifice during the day. It's actually easy. It might seem hard to some people that have never tried it, but the fasting definitely becomes hunger blunting, and when you get to have that big meal, it's incredible. And on a side note, it's about 3:18 on my time, still fasting. So, am I losing muscle right now, Nate? That's a serious question.
What's that? I'm sorry?
Am I losing muscle right now because I'm fasting?
No. There's some myths out there about fasting for sure.
Are you sure?
Yeah, look at that. Man.
That's fasted. That's catabolism. Yeah.
You're making me feel very small right now.
Yeah.
No, I mean that's the thing that people don't understand. That's where you really do have to get into sort of the science of it. I know it bores the crap out of people, but that's really where people need to educate themselves, because otherwise they just hear a certain myth and they're like, oh yeah, I'm going to lose muscle if I skip a meal. Well, there's some things going on there in that, Protein, for example, digests very slowly in the system. If you look at some of the research out there, most whole food proteins digest, between 5 and 7 grams per hour. So, if you have a big feast at night when you're eating like a pound of meat and you got 125 grams of protein in your system, well, you have amino acids in your system for basically 24 hours the next day. So even if your body was burning amino acids, it'd be taking it from ingested protein, not from muscle stores. And also liver, like glycogen stores, liver can store 110 grams or between 80 and 110 grams of liver glycogen, and that's what your body primarily uses to regulate normal blood sugar and brain and CNS functioning. So you eat a big feast with a big carbs at night. Again, you're gonna have liver glycogen to support normal blood sugar all through the next morning and into lunch. So your body really not gonna have a need to break down muscle tissue if you're eating that big feast. Now, that's the thing, is like people have to look at the diet structure as a whole. Because there is some cases where, like, hey, if you're following a traditional plan and you like, hey, I'm not going to eat after 5 p.m. and I'm going to cut my carbs, after 3 p.m. And so you basically had nothing, right, for dinner and no carbohydrates to restock, liver
Right.
glycogen reserves. Well, now all of a sudden, you go into the next morning and now all of a sudden liver glycogen's low and there is potential for catabolic activity to happen. So you have to look at the diet structure as a whole. You can't just look at it in individual parts. So there is potential, but if you look at the diet as a whole, if you're feasting at night, you're restocking energy reserves. You have plenty of glycogen reserves, energy, fuel, and amino acids in your system to not slip into a catabolic state. And Serge Nubret used to talk about, this guy was way ahead of his time. I don't know if you know Serge Nubret, the great bodybuilder of the 70s, but people would ask him, he's like, hey, what do you eat for breakfast? He's like, oh, I never eat breakfast. I never ate breakfast. Yeah. I just ate enough the night before, so I had enough energy to train in the gym. And people thought that was just like, bodybuilder meathead talk, but actually he had it right.
Yeah, no kidding.
50 years ago, 40 years ago, something like that.
It's cool. I mean, even being in the fastest state, you feel more energy, just from not having to digest. And I mean, there's definitely some other really cool positives that people don't realize. For one, I used to have a lot of acne, and it just cleared up once I started skipping breakfast. And I've been fasting 16 to 18 hours a day, for a year and a half now. So, and I put on some good muscle. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's in terms of length of the fasting too. So I'm definitely more of a believer in intermittent fasting than sort of like all day fasting,
right?
Alternate fasting, because I do think there comes a limit where you run out of liver glycogen stores and your body starts burning amino acids at a higher rate. So for me, I like the more. I'm not saying the all day fasting can't work, but for me, I prefer more intermittent fasting approaches where the fasting window is basically contained.
Yeah, can you move your camera down a bit? I'm just getting too much forehead. It's okay.
Where the fasting window is intermittent.
It's like that.
It's contained.
Yeah. No, yeah, go ahead.
So I like that approach better than the all day.
Yeah, I mean, I've tried both, and I mean, for me at least, some of the disadvantage, the all day I found just too difficult. After 18, after 20 hours, it just became just brutal, and that might just be something like where it's harder for leaner people to do it. Because I know overweight people, they have no issue going all day because they have so much fat reserves and so for me it was difficult. And then also it doesn't really address your eating style on the other days if you're only doing full fast once or twice a week.
Right. And to me, it's related to liver glycogen stores, especially for athletes. So, when you start to run out of liver glycogen stores, which are more transient than muscle glycogen stores, and they can be used up quicker because it's liver glycogen is basically what we use to regulate normal blood sugar and brain and central nervous system functioning. So, to me, that's where you start running out of liver glycogen stores. You start burning amino acids at a higher rate, and you start getting that kind of low blood sugar symptoms. That's where I think people can run into problems. But if you keep that within a window, 14 to 20 hours or something like that, it works great.
Right. So I guess that's
we can tie some of those things together. Is like that's why I put the starches at night too, all related to blood sugar, because if you think about it, what do most people do? They have a big starch-loaded lunch, and 3 hours later they can't. They're sleepy, right? They can't stay awake because of rebound hypoglycemia, right? We move that to the night to take advantage of that. Second thing, what happens? You talked about insomnia. People try to cut carbs at night. Well, carb intake basically impacts serotonin release, which helps us fall asleep. So basically, there's method to the madness. Although the template
For sure.
it's like, dude, eat a paleo lunch and eat a Japanese style dinner with all your starches there. There's actually a lot of science and research and method behind that madness. But if you just want to know what to do, it's actually really simple.
Yeah. No, it's so true. I mean, I feel like it works so well. Just with how we function. I mean, keeping fasting during the day or keeping carbs low during the day. You're just energized. You're focused. You don't have those energy like highs and lows. It's just pure clarity, and great concentration. And then at night, when you start to add in those starches, you just feel so relaxed and at ease. It's like, whoa. It's really cool.
That's exactly it. That's the whole hunt and feast, man. That's what we're meant. We're meant to be up in energy production mode. Our body's burning reserve fuels as an energy source, which is a really heightened energy state, both cognitively and physically. And then, you're right. You can come home and have that feast and relax and actually be able to sit and digest your food. And it's just better from an evolution perspective, but in our modern society, it's just better. Like a lot of my clients who could never get results before, they're more, I train across the gamut in terms of offline. I train, some athletes all the way down to busy professionals, and my athletes could always get results, right? Whatever they do, they're just disciplined and dedicated enough, they're going to get results. But what I found is that people who are on the other spectrum, more like just busy professionals who don't really care that much about fitness, but want the results, they found this plan to be way more practical for them too, because they're like, look, I can have a salad at lunch and then actually be able to go home and have a real dinner with my family or a business dinner, and it actually works. What I'm finding now is that my non-athletic clients are getting way better results than on any other plan in the past.
Right. What? For sure. I know like the athletic crowd or like the bodybuilding crowd, they're very obsessive, and they'll do they'll want to do whatever's going to be the most effective for them, regardless of how painful or shitty it's going to be. But then of course with this approach, it like there is the methods, the madness. It works extremely well from a physiological standpoint.
Absolutely. On many different levels, I think. And listen, I'm not just pumping this stuff just to pump it. I mean, this is what I do. This is what I believe. This is what has helped people in my circles. So I just think it's a lot of diet plans don't work because they look good on paper, but they don't take into account the practicality of the plan. Right. And I think this is just way more practical.
And I guess with the intermittent fasting and I guess keeping the carbs lower during the day, your body's so much more efficient at burning fat, especially when you get to that point where stubborn fat can be an issue. The mobilization is so good from the insulin being low, so that can be an advantage there.
That's correct, right? So if you're eating carbs every 3 hours, what's happening is your body basically shifts into using the ingested glucose as its primary fuel for a few hours. So and then insulin being elevated from those carbs basically inhibits fat mobilization and oxidation. So what you're doing is you're basically, if it helps people, is like, listen, basically think of your day as two different parts. During the day, you want to be burning fat primarily as your fuel source, and then you want to be restocking those carbs at night, basically.
But yeah, very cool. And the HGH also gets a really nice boost from the low insulin and the fasting during the day.
That's right. That's correct.
Yeah, I've noticed after a big night, like a high carb dinner, and then lifting the next day in the afternoon, empty stomach, or afternoon for me because I sleep in. Just you get wicked muscle pumps and definition. The skin gets super tight. It's cool.
I mean, it's all down. Trust me, I've looked at it from a lot of different angles in terms of, and that's the thing too, is if you're going to do it naturally, you gotta look at endocrinology and stuff like that too. And I think that's a lot of programs get thrown out there because guys are using, and this is not calling anyone out, or I don't judge anyone, but a lot of people who write programs are using performance enhancing drugs. So they can maybe follow suboptimal structures or diet programs and still get phenomenal results, and they don't really understand the natural sort of hormonal enhancement.
Right.
So you need to take all those things into account when you're designing a plan for a natural person versus someone who's not natural or enhanced or something like that.
Right, for sure. I mean, it's with this approach, it seems like you definitely get like really optimal nutrient partitioning into the muscles from increased insulin sensitivity and
Absolutely.
adding the carbs in at night. So it's definitely it's definitely a lifestyle approach as well as a physiological it's got its physiological benefits too.
Yeah, absolutely, and it works.
Yeah. I mean, this is what I do. I mean, I'm freaking obsessed with nutrition. It's all I read about, and this is what I've gravitated to.
Yeah, and me too. And actually, someone was asking me that the other day. They're like, "How do you get involved in nutrition?" I'm like, "Well, actually, my background, my formal education is more in like kinesiology, and so it's more on the training side of it. And I came out, out of college with this basically big ego, and I'm like, well, I got a background in kinesiology, biomechanics, physics. I'm going to design the most badass training programs for people, and I'm going to get results everywhere. And what I found was that, I paid no attention to people's diets and nutrition and design maybe, the best training programs there were, and people were getting mediocre results at best. And I'm like, and having competed in a few bodybuilding shows and stuff, I'm like, it's no brainer. The diet is way more important than the training for body composition goals. And then, I just began that sort of 12-year self-obsession with nutrition and researching and learning more about it and studying different camps. And like I said, taking what I felt were the best principles from each one and then formulating this thing. And I'm not saying I'm right. I'm saying it's what I believe, and I think there's good science to back it up. But there's other approaches out there that work too. So people just gotta find what works for them. But what I'm finding is that people who have really spent time studying nutrition have it's kind of weird. They've come to a similar, not exactly similar, but very similar sort of landing point.
Right.
On this. Merging these things, so it's pretty cool to know that there's other people out there who believe in it as well.
Yeah, I mean, people I've talked to and people I work with, just incredible results, and it's just so easy from a functional standpoint. So that's cool. Any final points, Nate?
No.
We went through. Yeah.
I mean, I just say, it goes back to Bruce Lee. Like I'm all about what works in the real world. So for people who are interested in trying out, I say try it out. If it doesn't work for you, there's no reason to stick to it. Or if something's working for you now, there's no reason to change it. But for people who are looking for something new and maybe haven't gotten results in some of the plans that are out there, I say give it a shot because. Like I said, it's based on a lot of science. It's based on a lot of practical experience too, from working with people in the real world. So I think it's merging those and try it out and see if it works for you. I know I'll never go back to eating any other way, or I'll never change it again. And this is coming from someone who's changed his approach many times.
Many times, very cool. I mean, you have that.
I'm on something that works for me and is practical and allows me to stay in good shape year round and still have a life and a career. And it's what works for me. So try it out. Don't cling to it as a system, but if it works for you, I'd be stoked and I'd be happy that you found something.
Right. I mean, you're the perfect person to learn from because you have that. You have the educational background, like the scientific. You have the scientific focus. You also do it yourself. You're in the trenches, and so when those two merge, it's way more effective than if you're just on one side of the fence. And then you also work with tons of clients. So it's definitely definitely the trifecta of perfection.
Well, I appreciate that, and it does. I think real world, working with people in the real world, you kind of like I said, if I hadn't been working with real world people, I'd probably be like, hey, fine, I'll just stick with this bodybuilding nutrition because I could suffer through it and do this, and be fine. But it really was working with people in the real world that I think really, push me to pursue something further, because I'm like, this is just not practical. I would even write diet plans for people and be like, okay, here's your 5 small meals, and here you're going to starve on some lettuce leaves at night and just eat protein. And I'm like, as soon as I finish writing, I'm like, they're not going to follow it. There's no way, you know what I mean? So having that opportunity to work with people in the real world actually push me to pursue something a little more further and a little more down the lines of practicality. So I think that's important. I think that's what a lot of writers and people miss, is that don't just assume what works for you is going to work for other people.
Right. At the end of the day, I mean, you want to look great, but you also want your fitness and nutrition to enhance your life, not detract from it. If you can't go out because you're not going to be able to fit in your meal, that's a little sad. So
it is, and that's where you got to look at, like, hey man, anything can work in the short term, in like a 4 week. I mean, that's the thing, is that's what's hot, that's what sells, is like, hey, 4 week whatever extreme plan to get ripped. I'm like, dude, but what are you gonna do after that 4 weeks? You're just gonna get fat again? Like, you gotta look beyond the short term. If you're in this game for the long term, right? So to me, I always tell people, like, dude, don't you want to be in shape year round? Don't you want to you don't want to be yo-yoing, right? Like of course there's different phases, but with your overall approach, it needs to be a practical, sustainable approach. And like we've talked about, I think this structure makes it way more practical than traditional fitness nutrition.
All right, perfect. That is Nate Miyake of Intermittent Feast. What's the website? Is it intermittentfeast.com?
Yes, that's correct. intermittentfeast.com.
All right, very cool. You can learn more about him there. He is a brilliant mind in the nutrition industry, and if you ever do some reading online, you're bound to bump into him countless times, because he's all over the web right now. People are digging up his stuff because it's getting shit done and making it a whole lot more fun. So.
Well, I'm glad people are finding it.
All right, perfect.
All right, brother.
All right, great talk. Later.